Hello. The Divine Code reading for January 1st, pages 415 and 416. We're in the chapter on laws of a pursuer in self-defense. Topic number 16. Therefore, this will apply if one is driving in a highway full of fast-moving cars, where it is not possible to stop suddenly or move to the right or the left without causing a serious accident. And a person on foot suddenly moves into the middle of the highway traffic, of the traffic lane. If a fatal accident will probably occur if the approaching driver suddenly stops or swerves, it is permissible for the driver to continue forward and fatally strike the person who is suddenly in his lane, because that person is considered to be a pursuer. So this is a very limited situation. It's a regular highway with many lanes. It's a congested highway, and the cars are driving very quickly. So there's no opportunity for the driver to do anything. And if he does do something, not only would he be killing himself, he might be killing other people. So the first question would be, does he have the right to, we're assuming that the person that suddenly shows up in the lane is not doing it maliciously. So this is a lot of theoreticals here. There's no reason to think the person's doing it maliciously. And the question is, does the person driving the car have the permission to run over the person in front of him that suddenly shows up in front of them? If he were to swerve out of his lane and might cause himself to die, or might cause other people to die. In that kind of a situation where there's nothing he can do about it, and it's not negligence assuming it's not negligence on his own part. He's driving the speed limit, he's following all the laws, and someone just shows up in front of him. The person tripped and fell off the overpass or something, so it's a pure accident at this point. He would be, if he cannot do anything else, he would be allowed to run the person over. And that person is considered a pursuer, is not a judgment, it's not a moral call on the person that shows up in the highway lane. It's not saying that he has the status of pursuer, a non-judgmental call at that point. It's just that's the way it is. Just like the baby is not considered a bad person for threatening the life of the mother, but that's just the way it turns out. Rabbi Zalman Nechemia Goldberg comments that this concept introduced here is that the person can be considered a pursuer due to his life-threatening inaction if he is not taking the needed action to prevent death of one whose life is endangered because of his presence in a certain location. As like a pedestrian who moves into a lane of fast-moving heavy traffic and stops there. So if we're bringing a judgment call in concerning the person that's in the lane, the person that's the pursuer, if it requires a judgment call on his behalf. Now, from the perspective of the guy in the car, he can't tell the intention of the person. He just knows that somebody suddenly shows up in his lane. Someone just ran out across the road and then stopped in front of him, or that the paths cross right in front of the car. We don't know the reason why that happened. And it's kind of irrelevant as to the reason why it happened. That's to be figured out later. But in the exact situation, what is the person in the car to do? If he cannot swerve out of the way, then he would hit the person. He would not be responsible, assuming he's following all the rules of the road to begin with. He's driving safely to begin with. It is possible that the person only came to be a pursuer by default because his own actions of placing himself in the situation. And it could be somebody else's actions also. I mean, just the fact that he's there. The fact that he's there. It's not, the default would be that he is there. And that's really the only situation that we can look at this point, rather than intention. Because we don't know the intention. That can hopefully be figured out later on by the investigation as to why did the guy suddenly rush across the highway. This can be compared to one who illegally enters a full boat and cannot take its additional weight and starts to sink. If the rightful occupants of the boat are in danger of drowning, they may throw him off since he is considered a pursuer. See Rima Koshin Mishpat 384. Although in the case of the pedestrian, the person's very existence in that spot is making him into a pursuer, it appears that there is no difference. So now we have a boat that I'm not sure how they're saying illegally, if he's a stowaway, or the boat says 300 people are allowed to be on the boat, and no one's paying attention, and a 301st person got on the boat. So it's not his fault, but it just happens to be that way. How we're making these judgment calls needs to be better clarified. The author adds that it can also be explained in this situation. So the author of the Divine Code adds it can also be explained in this situation. One may act in a way that the world is regularly run. For example, if one cannot save a fetus from the expense of the mother's life, so too one cannot make the driver on the busy highway liable for preserving his own life in an expected way, despite the fact that his decision not to act, that is to abruptly stop or swerve on a fast-moving, crowded highway, will cause the pedestrian's death. See Tizit Eliezer, volume 1570. So now we're okay. So now we're, because it's difficult to know at the split-second decision, like the highway situation or even the boat situation. It's difficult to know what's proper. And the way that the road usually works, well, a lot of that has to do with highway situations would depend upon local laws, which is going to vary from one place to another. In some places, pedestrians are allowed to cross a highway, and the cars have to drive in a way that allows this. Other places, there's what's called a freeway, where there's not supposed to be anybody on the road, walking on the road, or even have access to be able to walk on the road. So it varies based on the situation. So what is the way that the world operates in that situation is going to vary from one place to another, and the rules would follow that. If someone is driving on a road and a pedestrian is suddenly encountered in the car's lane, the pedestrian is not considered to be a pursuer if the driver can stop and swerve without causing a fatal accident. So again, it's not a moral judgment on the person who shows up in the lane. We're not looking at that aspect of it at this point. If it's possible for the car not to hit the person, then the driver is required not to hit the person, regardless of whether or not the guy's supposed to be there. if the car can stop or swerve without causing a fatal accident. In this case, the driver is forbidden to strike the pedestrian and must do everything possible to avoid this, even if he will have to crash his car by swerving off the road and thereby suffer a non-fatal injury. A lot of highways have drainage places on either side that if a car does swerve off the highway, it'll have sort of it won't be an abrupt accident. It'll be more of a cushioned accident, hopefully. Sort of like guardrails near bridges that have, it kind of lifts the car up and slows it down for the impact. So hopefully the driver can swerve out of the way, even if it totals his car. It's more important to total his car than it is to, the person's life. Even the person that shouldn't be in the highway, his life is still more important than the car, or even injuries for the driver. In some situations, a person may be legally driving a vehicle in an area where others have equal rights to be present on foot, and the vehicle operator is required to be alert for others who might come into his path. And this is in the city, there's crosswalks at every crossing, at least in, depending on your locale. People have the ability to be in the lane of traffic. Someone getting in and out of his car that's parked, he might be sort of in the lane depending on the road conditions, and the driver of the car needs to be paying attention to that. This could apply, for example, if someone is driving an off-road motorcycle or snowmobile in a wilderness area. In this case, the driver has no right to drive over and possibly fatally injure a pedestrian whom he encounters suddenly in his path. Even though he may have to sacrifice his own life to avoid the collision, because the pedestrian in this case is not a pursuer any more than the driver is. So this reverts to the principle of who says your blood is redder than his. And this is going to require a lot more explanation than what's being given here. The person that is in the shared lane, if there's a shared lane with cars and bicycles are legally both allowed to be in the lane, at what threshold do we say that something is an accident? And at what threshold do we say that somebody should have been paying more attention? And a lot of that can be figured out afterwards. So the question, we can't, the person cannot, hindsight is 20/20. So in a real life situation, how does a person act? It's going to require a tremendous amount of defensive driving on the person who's driving a vehicle to be cautious. And the level of caution will vary based on the situation, but there needs to be a tremendous amount of defensive driving. And how would we put a threshold between the person who shows up suddenly in a highway lane and the person who is on a snowmobile lane, where supposedly pedestrians should also be careful around snowmobile areas? How do we mark out these thresholds as to where the driver will be permitted to run over the person and where the driver would be required to give up his own life for the sake of the other person? And these are split-second decisions that have to have rules up front. We can't ask afterwards what he should do. He doesn't have the opportunity at the time to ask that question. So we need better clarification as to where would be a situation where the pursuer the person is considered a pursuer and the person is not considered a pursuer. And that needs to be better clarified. Topic number 17. In any case where there is a chance, a person should try to warn the individual or unintentional pursuer to stop him without physical intervention. If this is not possible, he may intervene physically to save the one who is being pursued. So if this person, it's a third person. A third person should try to warn. So if someone sees something happening, there's a requirement to try to help the situation. And a person who witnesses this should try to stop, first of all, by warning, and second of all, by trying to physically intervene. Now we understand at this point it can still refer to an unintentional. If it's an intentional pursuer, then it's easy to figure out. You stop the intentional pursuer. The unintentional pursuer is much more difficult, because how does the person standing by, if he's yelling to get out of the way, then he gets out of the way, hopefully. But if he's not getting out of the way, but he can't hear the person, it's not his fault. He can't hear the person. How would the pursuer, how would the third party be able to make the decision, such as earlier when we had two people that were physically going to kill each other, and both people would be killed? The third party can decide to protect his friend by killing the other person. And how we justify that needs better clarification, and how the person in this scenario would choose between one person or other who to save requires better clarification, because how does the third party make these decisions? Torah, Shulchan Aruch, Choshen Mishpat, chapter 425, and Rambam, Laws of Murderers 1:7. It was explained in topic 3 above that if it's possible for a person to save the pursued by hurting the limbs of the pursuer and yet kills the pursuer, he is a murderer. So again, it's the person that gets involved. However the decision is made that one person's a pursuer and the other person is a victim in an unintentional situation, however that the decision is made, if it's possible, the intervention has to be done in the least necessary means. Once the decision is made to be involved, if person can yell, he yells. He pushes the person out of the way. He pushes him out of the way. If he has to damage a limb, he has to damage a limb. Killing the person when it's not necessary to do so would be considered murder. And that's the rule in all these situations. It's the person, killing the person is the last step that hopefully never needs to be reached. And it has to be a clear cut that one person has the right and the other person is the pursuer. And it's very difficult to say that on a split-second decision. If the person makes the wrong decision, then he's considered a murderer. Topic number 18. Anyone who kills a pursuer in a permissible way should not be sentenced or fined by the court, since he has no liability. Likewise, he may not be killed by the blood redeemer or killed or the killed pursuer, see chapter 4. And that's going to be in tomorrow's reading. There's a big question. The blood redeemer goes after the manslaughter, the person that killed who should not have killed. And normally in countries' court systems, these kind of manslaughter is handled by the court system. Any civilized country would have a court system that handles manslaughter cases. The Torah does not mandate what to do. The Torah simply says that if this case comes up of manslaughter, it's not a pure accident or not something that needed to be done, but a case of manslaughter where it's negligence, that it's not judged by the Torah law. One possibility is for the pursuer. Now, the pursuer can kill the person if that's how the legal system is set up, or the legal system can go about figuring out what to do. And it's in a country where you have a legal system that figures out what to do, you would not have a pursuer. You would not have the blood redeemer. The court system will make that determination. And if the court system makes the determination that the person was justified in what he did, or was not liable for what he did, not that he's justified, how do you justify something? But he's not considered liable for what he did, then the blood redeemer would have to accept that. Topic number 19. In any case where an onlooker, a rescuer, tries to permissibly save the victim by killing the pursuer, but the pursuer overpowers and kills the rescuer, he is liable for this as murder. The pursuer is not considered as the one being pursued, since he should have desisted from the forbidden action of pursuing the victim. See topic 411. That's the next chapter on the blood redeemer and manslaughter. Mishnah Lameka on Rambam, Laws of Murderers, Chapter 1, Min Hakinot, Commandment 600. It is clear that we are referring to a case where the pursuer knows that the rescuer is attacking him in order to rescue the pursued person. But if the pursuer is unsure as to why this person, the rescuer, is coming to kill him, he is not liable for capital punishment for defending himself by killing the rescuer, as might be the case, for example, if a person is judged as a pursuer at all times because he repeatedly hires others to kill, as explained in topics 1-8. So in the case of an onlooker, or in the case of, well, not just an onlooker, but the person who is trying to prevent the pursuer, if it's a case where the pursuer knows what's going on and he's doing it anyway, he's doing something that's not permissible, he's breaking the law to begin with, and therefore as a consequence of his breaking the law, someone's trying to kill him and he kills the person first, he would be liable for that action because it's from his own breaking the law to begin with. This would be the case like a person breaks into tries to rob a store, and an onlooker pulls a gun out to try to stop him, and the robber turns suddenly and shoots the onlooker who got involved. The robber would be liable for the murder, even if he was doing it to save his own life, because the robber started the sequence of action, and it's his own fault. Therefore, he's liable for what happens afterwards because of it. But in the case of someone who suddenly shows up in the lane of traffic, I don't know if it's the same, if he did it illegally, and we're speaking here of something being done illegally, also with the person that adds his weight to the boat illegally, we're still not clear what happens in the case of the unintentional person. If it's intentional, then clearly he's responsible for what happens, and therefore he would be held liable for murder. But if it's unintentional, he didn't do anything wrong. Some sequence of events happened. Got pushed out of a car and he stands up and he's got the next car coming along is going to run him over. Can he be held liable if he protects himself by killing the person trying to, that's going to kill him? Would he be held liable in that situation? Or would he be permitted to kill the person that's trying to kill him in order to protect his own life, because he suddenly becomes the unintended pursuer? So that's areas that need better clarification, because right now, the way it stands, the Divine Code seems to be speaking of a person that does something illegally, but we need to look at what happens in the case where it's actually unintended and the pursuer is purely victim of circumstance himself, and how the laws work in that situation. Thank you.